The art of flow.
Welcome to The Art of Flow, a podcast that explores connecting with your body, mind, and soul via movement arts and creative exploration. Through conversations with movement artists, circus performers, flow artists, and fire dancers. My name is Morgan Dalgano, and I'm the creator and host of the podcast, a flow arts enthusiast and a life coach.
Hi, today we will be talking with Otillia Ward about healing with flow arts, both physically and mentally. Otillia was born in South Africa and immigrated to the USA in 2004. She completed her bachelor's in San Francisco and discovered her love for hula hooping. She believes flow arts is a joyful activity with health benefits both for the mind and body at any age. Otillia has been passionately hooping for a decade and wanted a recipe for success to elevate her practice and tap into her flow state. But she discovered a lot more about the universe, magic, and love. Otillia has taught and performed at various events, shows, and online in and around the Bay Area. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
How did you get into flow arts and fire dancing?
So it started a lot earlier than I originally thought. So originally I thought it started around college, but I kind of really dug down and thought to my past. And so in South Africa, I was doing dancing and gymnastics and tap and all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that I did is called trompoppies, or America's version of color guard. And so it's very militaristic in style, and we have different staffs with one head or two heads, with flags on them, and then also a non-prop person as well. And we'll create like these patterns. And like I said, it's very militaristic. Anyway, I loved it so much. I came to the States, I brought my staff with me, and someone stole it from me. So I stopped completely. But I mean, yeah, I know. But toys were still in my life. I mean, I was playing hacky sack in high school and stuff like that. Then I got to college and I was like, okay, well, I started seeing flow arts, because at that point, before this happened, I didn't know it existed. And this is also like right before MySpace and stuff came out. Anyway, so I took a class at the Crucible actually in, I think, 2011.
And for folks who don't know, the Crucible is a place in Oakland, California it's like an art center.
Yeah, exactly. And so I took my first class there, and then I got introduced to fire, but it didn't really click in with me. And also staffing is really hard. At the time, I was obsessed with Eileen Lawler, and I really wanted to do like contact staff. But I wasn't really able to teach myself because I was very much in the closet. I didn't want to go out or anything. So I kind of stopped that. And then my therapist was like, yo, you need to get a hobby. I was like, okay. So out of everything, I picked hula hooping, which was really odd at the time because I hated hula hoopers. I was like, oh, hula hoopers. Oh, nah. And I really thought about this too. I was like, I think it's because of how they have to express with their bodies, especially on body in the time when I was starting, this is a little over 10 years ago. It's really much on body and kind of homosexual, and coming from a very conservative background, and also having the experiences that I had with abuse and rape and things like that. I was very, very uncomfortable with my body. But anyway, so I picked hooping, and I love hoopers now, obviously. I have nothing against them now. Yeah.
I'm curious. So you're expressing that there's a little bit of self-consciousness or resistance to hooping because of your own, like what it represented when it came to the way you interact with the hoop in your body and your own personal history. What allowed you to shift and sort of make this leap from, well, staff's not like I like it, but it's not really calling to me, to choose hooping?
I'm not really sure, but I think a part of it with the staff is that my body wasn't in the right place. Like with contact staff, you actually have to be quite flexible and strong. And I wasn't any of those things. I haven't worked out in for a long time. I gave up dancing, all this stuff when I came to the States, because I was very depressed leaving my country behind. But I think the transition happened because I actually stopped staffing. I wasn't doing anything physical. And I was looking at hooping specifically because I could lose weight around my middle, because that's a place I always have problems with. And I think that made me like accept it, that I'm actually going to work on this specific part. And that really made me fall in love with it in the end of the day. I think the rhythm or something, right? Connecting with your body in that respect.
I've totally gone down that thought pathway of, ooh, if I was to hoop, like I would work on my abs. Like there's certain tools or certain props that work on different body parts. Like poi, which I spin, is really great. Like my shoulders and my arm strength. Like I have pretty defined shoulder blades and muscles in my back that I never even knew I could develop before I was spinning poi.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I agree with 100%. They each have an element that we can hone into. And I think that's also the nice thing is when you start crossbreeding everything and taking the experiences from prop to prop, that's when it starts getting interesting. Like, for instance, what's happening with juggling right now. I feel like flow arts is really kind of like gone into the juggling world and vice versa, where there's a big acceptance of the two expressions and then finding that middle ground.
Definitely. So once you decided to try hula hooping, you're like, okay, I got my hobby therapist. I'm good. What happened?
Well, I kept hooping, obviously, I'm still here. And then I started teaching the first time 5 years ago, and that was kind of like a fail, which is fine. We have to learn to build out ourselves. And I finally got a little bit out of my closet and I started going to jams. Back then, it was still the Bay Area hoop jams, also Dolo Flow. Once in a while when I was like, okay, I'm going to get out and like show what I'm doing. Anyway, I met a girl called Gloria, and she actually still spins. I saw that she's fire hoops, and I was like, "Hey, can you show me how to fire hoop?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, for sure, I could definitely do that." And then she also helped me acquire a spot in the Aries Conclave in 2017. And so I went to Burning Man that year, performed fire for the first time. And coming from a dancing background where I did spend a lot of time on stage and things like that, it was kind of like something caught me again. And I was like, wow, I want to do this more. I want to start performing and everything again. Like this feels right. It feels good. But a lot of time was in between that until where we are now. And a lot of things had to happen in my growth for me to be able to do what I do now. And it's still not easy. I'm still very much a hermit, but I can also be very outgoing and like exuberant. And so I just have to constantly balance the two. Otherwise, I kind of get really, really out of whack. But I think that was really like the spark again, was when I joined that conclave in 2017 with Gloria and everyone else. That was cool. And since then, yeah, I've been doing it since then.
So you were inspired to perform once you got back on stage and you were part of the conclave and you had picked up hooping, you learned fire hooping, you started coming out to some local events and jams to share knowledge and show off what you were doing on your own. And it's interesting you talk about this balance between the personal flow and it in private and for yourself, and out in performance and out in connecting with community, and kind of what balance do you need to find based upon your level of social energy?
Um, so I have to have a lot of time to myself, actually. So if you ever do personality tests, I have one on if you're introverted and extroverted, and mine was like 60% introvert and 40% extrovert. And so I was like, okay. So even I have to like kind of take myself away from people and just be by myself and kind of meditate and do stuff. And I've always done this my whole life, and I never really realized why. And I think it's because in a way I'm very sensitive to the energies around me, and so I can take it in a lot more. I take people's energies into me, and therefore I kind of need to go out to kind of rediscover myself and ground myself so that I can be out and feel comfortable around people.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, how has flow arts been a part of your physical healing journey?
Wow, that is actually quite a loaded question. There's a lot that goes into it, but I'm going to try to give it the nutshell. So a few years ago, I ended up in a behavioral facility because I had severe depressive disorder and PTSD. I was very, very sick. Let's put it this way. I would cry and stand still, and people had to physically move me. I couldn't talk. I couldn't really communicate. And when I did talk, all that came out is that I want to die and I don't want to be here anymore. So I spent a week in a behavioral facility. While I was there, obviously now I'm being put on drugs and all this stuff. I was talking to one of the psychologists, and he decided to prescribe me hooping for 30 minutes a day, and actually allowed me to bring hoops into the facility, which was a big deal. They made a big deal out of it. They even like printed prescription tabs and put them on my hoops. No one else was allowed to touch them. They were just for me. And they really helped while I was in there. But, you know, in the saddest place in the whole world, and you take a hula hoop in there and it gets people smiling, every person in there wanted to pick it up and play. And I feel like that was the one thing that was missing in that place, was play. You know, everyone's so serious and talking about their emotions and making art, which is cool, but no one's playing. No one's like laughing and enjoying, being joyful like a child. You know, being childlike is very, very important, even as adults. So I get out of the behavioral facility. I keep taking my prescriptions. I keep taking my hoop prescription.
I
But
love
within,
this hoop prescription. This doctor was brilliant, or was listening to you potentially.
oh yeah, I totally think people should be prescribed toys to play with from now on, because it does make a huge difference. But I think also the other part was, now I am kind of like shook up. I'm like, now I'm like really like, okay, what is flow and how can I take this into my personal life? So I already read Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, but I reread it again. And once again, I found myself in the same position of, this is just kind of raw data and information. There's no like, hey, you need to do A, B, C, and D to apply this to get into the flow state. So this kind of started leading me on the path of different sciences. Now you have to understand, at the time I was very atheist. And through this path, I actually found spiritualism by finding all these sciences. So one of the 8 characteristics of flow is when your thoughts and your actions come together, you get into flow. And your critical mind gets shut down. Now, so that's just like a theory from the data that Mihaly has collected, because it's one of his 8 characteristics. Now, when you look at other scientists, there's this one scientist called Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's a neuroscientist, and he does brain mapping. I don't think he's the one that discovered it, but this is how the brain works. So we have the neocortex, which is a critical thinking mind. This is helping us understand the information. Once we understand the information, it actually goes to our limbic brain, which takes that information, which is an emotion, and then that emotion secretes, you know, all the chemicals that goes into our autonomic system, nervous system, into the rest of our body. And then it goes into the cerebellum, or the reptilian brain, which is like, you know, how I remember everything, like my unconscious, how to eat, breathe, walk, all those things. So catching, right? Everything that I don't have to think about. So basically, when you're in the flow state, your neocortex will shut down. So the other 2 are doing the work, essentially. I mean, it doesn't completely shut down, but it's that critical mind, that critical neocortex, critical monkey chatter that shuts down. And that is also now scientifically proven that the brain basically does that for us to be in the flow. But the most important thing here is the brain waves. So your brain has different brainwave states. And we operate in beta, and we're operating in beta right now. So my brain is like high energy, thinking a lot, critical thinking, going super high valleys and peaks, right? Super busy. Now you can, if you're on high beta brainwaves all the time, which is stress induced, it's actually not healthy for you. You need to actually be in a slower state that's more natural. Anyway, I'm trying to make this as short as possible because there's a lot of information. But basically what happens when you start meditating or being in the flow state, your mind goes from a beta brainwave, which is super busy, down to theta. And what they also found is that when we're in beta, it's kind of like an orchestra trying to make music and no one's in tune. So it's just a bunch of noise. So all the other brain waves that you have in your brain, they're all doing their own thing. They're like, yeah, my own peaks and valleys.
There's a
like,
lot of discord happening. There's a lot of simultaneous activity.
Yes, exactly. And so now when your brain goes into the theta state, what starts happening the more you do it, all the other brain waves will start matching up. So you kind of go from an incoherent brainwave state to a coherent brainwave state, which is also to do with your emotions and connects with the rest of your body, especially because we are, you know, vibrating things. in a sense. So your brain starts working more coherently because your thoughts and your actions are meeting up, and essentially, and you're shutting down what I'm supposed to do now or later, or what happened yesterday or a year ago, or like all those other thoughts kind of dissipate, so you're in the present moment. So the more that I did this, right? So I used to have panic attacks and I would hurt myself. I was really, really sick. The more I started meditating, I started getting laughing attacks instead, like straight up. This is not even like made up. The more I meditated and made it a part of my practice, the healthier I got. I've been off of my medication for over a year now. Everyone's like, oh no, they're off of the meds. That's a bad thing. No, it's a great thing. Isn't this what we're supposed to do? Is work towards the place where I can say like, okay, I don't need medication anymore. I can come to my own inner self and rely on myself to work through these emotions and experiences, right? And so it's a good place to be.
That's such a nice transition to go from panic attacks to laughing attacks. What a dramatic change in your life from flow arts, from getting into the flow state more consistently. Because when we say flow arts, often on the podcast, I'm referring to like spinning objects and prop manipulation, but other guests have talked about how we can get into the flow state with anything, doing the dishes, walking. So we're talking about flow state right here.
Yeah. And so when I really believe that people are drawn to flow arts because somewhere inside they know that they need to go inside, but if society puts down the fact to sit down and meditate, sit and do nothing, that's not acceptable. But when you bring a toy into play, it's like, okay, well, this is productive and this and this and that, unknowingly, that they're bringing themselves to a world of meditation closer and closer, unknowingly. But because of the state of how our world is, we kind of need to go into something that's movement based, because sitting down and meditating is just a lot of times not an option for people.
And sometimes for different people, it can be really hard to sit and meditate because there's all the thoughts of, am I doing this right? And like, what's coming up? But if you have an external focus on your movement and you're getting in touch somatically, it can be an entryway, like you're saying, to turning off that all the frontal activity.
Yeah, exactly.
Flip into a meditative state.
Yeah. So just so everyone knows, I'm not a doctor. So if I have any information incorrect, always let me know. I'm always happy to fix any information. And especially with everything always being updated, things are changing information wise constantly. But to just kind of backtrack, I can totally tell you is that my mind was always in a high beta brainwave state, and therefore I got sick. And then when I started changing my thoughts and my patterns, it started healing me. So I think that's really like the key component there, is because it started going into the other parts of my life, like say washing dishes and cleaning the house and doing laundry, because honestly we all hate those. But when you kind of stop resisting and accepting it and get it done, then everything else in your life will flow. Clean house, clean mind. When you put flow into your life in every aspect, it will start cleaning out all the other problems for you. You can't just have it in one aspect of your life, because that's very limiting to yourself. And when you start including the mundane or even the non-mundane, then it really just keeps everything more on an even keel. You'll have less emotional ups and downs as well. So we're trying to go from this to just kind of like this, right?
When it comes to taking care of yourself and like incorporating that flow into every aspect, what do you prioritize, or how do you do that?
Well, first of all, I'm a mom, so that doesn't happen a lot. I prioritize meditation, actually. Because I teach kids and I do movement arts with them, so gymnastics and things like that. So I'm always moving anyway. So even if I can't get to my hooping that day, at least I still meditate, because that will ground me again into the here and now. Because I definitely have struggled with a lot of anxiety, and I still do. There's still a lot of things to fix. It's not like you get to the destination and you're done. No, it's actually the opposite. It's like we have to keep going. We meet a goal and then our goal changes. Mastery is a moving object. So you're constantly going to the next step and next step. It's just important to kind of stop and be thankful for the step that you're in, even if it's at the lower one. because being thankful makes a huge difference in how you view everything and understand everything. Because if you're coming from a lack, constant like, I don't have this and I don't have that, I can't do this trick, right? You're never going to do it, and you're always going to feel that way because that's the emotion that you're putting out. And so if you put it out in a positive way, like, oh, I'm so thankful I have the time to pick up my prop right now, it's going to make an instant change for you.
So you're focusing on meditation and you're focusing on gratitude as a practice and what ripple effects that sends out into your life.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, someone put it to me this the other day. In a way, we're all wizards and witches and things, because when what I say is like, I'm spelling them out, right? I'm making a spell. So when I say I want to be dead, I'm going to keep having that thought, because thoughts or emotions are addictive. So every time I have that emotion, I keep getting addicted to that thought. So if I keep saying positive things, it has a ripple effect into the rest of my life. Now, this can be very hard if you're extremely depressed person. It can be very hard to believe a positive affirmation if you don't truly believe it on subconscious. So there's a lot of internal work that people who are in a super dark place actually need to do to start truly feeling gratitude and believing what they're saying. Because they've been lying to themselves technically for so long, like, you're ugly, you're not good enough, all those thoughts, those are basically lies, but you believe those lies to be the truth. So when someone tells you the truth of that you're beautiful, they're not going to believe that. They're going to think that is the lie. So they kind of have to go from the darkness to the light, because when you're in the darkness, you're not going to believe the light, and when you're in the light, you don't really believe the darkness. So you have to shift yourself from the one to the other one. And I would say self-compassion and gratitude are the two keys. Self-compassion, I think, is key number one. That was definitely my first step.
It's interesting because when you're speaking about all of these thoughts we feed ourselves that we subsist off of, and we're looking at what are they and how they impact our life, it makes sense what you're saying about Florence getting into a different brain state, a different wave. Theta waves will help you turn off some of those thoughts, giving you a break and letting your mental health improve or your spirit improve, and just have like a gap for a little bit of time so that you can breathe and then go back to some of that really hard, deep internal work.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that's a great way of saying it. Because when you play with something and you accomplish it, you're like on top of the world, baby. You know, like, I finally nailed this trick. It took me so long. And it creates this positive emotion that, like, oh, I am capable. I can do this. You know, I am worth something, and I'm expressing myself. And I think that's the most important part.
I'm curious about the physical. What aspects do you focus on primarily when it comes to your health and fitness? Is it like strength and conditioning? Are you looking at muscle building? What feels good? Increasing body knowledge?
So this is actually something I sat with for a long time in my practice. I like, even though I can be chaotic, I do like things to be very like kind of planned out, make it as quick as possible. Every time I do it better, you know, fixing any kinks, so it's a well-run oiled machine. And so I've always done that in my practice. It took me a while to figure it out. But so basically what I really focus on my first 0 to 20 minutes, 15 minutes or so, I really focus on strength, conditioning, stretching, prepping my mind and my body, because, you know, Mihaly, you know, he was like, okay, it takes, you know, average person 10 to 20 minutes to get into the flow state. So I was like, why don't I use that time to prep myself? And then when I get into that flow state, I have all my creative juices left over. Because what's happening a lot of times, we just go into a practice and we pick up this prop and we try to force ourselves into the flow state, which is using our creativity, but we're not even warmed up already or nothing, right? We're not prepped at all. We just like go into it, and then it like kind of wastes that creativity. And then when you are actually in the flow state, then by that time maybe you're like kind of tired and stuff. So by doing outside exercises that are like, you know, things like planks and push-ups or whatever, beforehand, I'm prepping my body, making myself stronger, increasing my stamina, etc., etc. And then when I get into my flow state, I have all my creative juices ready to roll. And so that's really what I focus on. It's really more about like how my practice is built, rather than the specific things that I'm focusing on. So my practice is really built to help me with my flow and keep it. So for instance, when I go into the flow state and I find like, oh, this is a cool exit or whatever, then I'll sit there and drill it because it is a flow state, or just to drill can be a flow state. And
So
then
I'm hearing that you warm up, you really focus on that flexibility, you really focus on that conditioning in order to pass that time to get signal to your body. Okay, now I'm doing movement. Now I'm ready to enter that flow state. And then once you hit the flow state, then you let yourself explore creativity, you let yourself explore whatever feels comfortable, whatever your body wants. And if you get into drilling and that's what feels like has a flow, you let yourself sit there and be in that for a while.
Oh,
That's
definitely.
really cool.
That's perfect way of putting it. And by the end, when you're tired and all those juices are out and you don't get into the flow anymore, I'll go back to like just drills, just basic drills. And sometimes even that can keep sparking the flow and keep it going, because now you're inspiring yourself. But I think the most important part here is accepting the mistakes that you make in your flow. Because when you start doing that, you find new tricks, new exit strategies, and new ways to enter other things. I see a lot of people will drop it and kind of give up, whereas I would like to like figure out like, oh, it's dropping this way. How can I scoop it back into another thing? And that makes it super fun. So you're really building your own puzzle that way.
You're also a hooping teacher. When did you begin teaching hooping and what inspires you to teach?
I think I might have been born to be a teacher, to be honest. I really like it. But B, like like one of my favorite games to play as a kid was teacher. And my friends hated it because we have enough school already. But anyway.
So cute.
I know, right? No, but so one of my friends were like, Otillia, you would be a good teacher. And so I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to try teaching, because I was really at that point in my life, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I went into teaching little kids, like pre-kindergarten, which is super fun. And there's a lot of cool, like psychological things that you can learn through children. It's pretty interesting. Then I started teaching as SF Super Hoops at the time. This is 5 years ago when I had my first hooping class. That taught me a lot. And then I would only do it like in the summers, and I only do like a few classes, and that's it.
And what age range was this?
What, my age range?
Oh, it was a hooping class you were a part of.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, so wait, I misunderstood that question. The age range of adult, like people learning the hooping, or
was the class, when you said you started doing a hooping class, were you teaching this hooping class or you were in the hooping class?
Oh, I was teaching the hooping class. At this point, I've already taken like classes with other people and, gone to things like hoop camp and stuff. So
got you. And the age, were you teaching kids in this hooping class, or was this an adult hooping class?
This was for adults, mainly adults. And anyway, fast forward a few years, I started working for a company called Fitness in Transit here in the Bay Area. I still work with them, and I was starting to take hooping classes to like little kids and it's everything. And then the pandemic happened, so that stopped. And then within the pandemic, I started doing one-on-one coaching and teaching online. And once things started opening up, I started classes again in the park, which was the number one choice. At that time we were still wearing masks in the park. But now I kind of like just being in the park. The studios are pretty expensive. So you kind of save money by going to the park. And you know what? There's something to say about being in nature as well. So it's kind of grounding instead of staring at full walls or being obsessed with yourself in the mirror as you're hooping, because people get really distracted with that too. And it just makes it a little bit more intimate almost, a little bit more personable, rather than like, hi, I'm an official class in this studio, but anyway, I think the main thing I love about teaching, even with the kids that I work with, is that aha moment when they get it, when they get that little flash of flow, man. It's like, I find it addictive to see. And sometimes I really just have these moments where my breath is taken away when I see someone's expression of capturing that flow state. It's almost like they become more beautiful and ethereal. It's pretty magical.
It's like a spark goes off inside of someone when they get something, or like they, they swallowed the juice, like they get it.
Yeah, and that seeing that spark it's addictive and beautiful, and like I just want to keep seeing it in my students and seeing them progress and grow older now too is great. Because a lot of them I'm not for the reason why I say that I'm teaching a circus camp right now, and I've taught one of the other kids at the school this past year, and within that year he's grown a lot, and it just kind of it's nice to see them progress. um
Have you seen stories of healing in some of your students in classes, or witnessed that in community members?
and our community members, I don't know everyone personally, but man, there's a lot of us who have used flow arts to escape addiction, depression, abuse, you name it. We are a hard bunch. A lot of us have had really hard life, and we found this art form to not escape it, but heal through it. Just to name a few, I know Bachelors, old school hooper, really well known for doing that as well. Even Hoopalicious is known for doing that. I mean, when we were at the flow show, Errol's piece was about that. So I think to a degree, every single person who's spinning a prop is healing. And seeing someone spinning a prop is actually healing for someone else, because they're like, oh man, they see that thing and then they want to do it, and then they go into it and then they start healing, and then they start healing the other person. I think this with any performance art, truly, really. We take the magic into the world and we help people heal and get into the present moments away from everything else that's kind of jabbing at them. And so we're healing ourselves, but we don't realize this, but we're healing other people too. The first hooper that I saw that I really loved, right, that was healing for me to see that.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, every time we watch each other spin props, or we look around and see someone new pick it up, you're getting inspired. And in that inspiration, there's a healing process. And you get to witness someone, like you said, have that spark, that joy, or that flow moment, which can again reinvigorate your own personal practice.
Oh, definitely.
What's your personal philosophy about art and performance? Like, what guides you in the creation of performances?
Probably emotions, right, that we're trying to process. And I think really that is what any art is an expression. And if the one question we keep asking ourselves is, why are we here? It's probably to express yourself, because there's really nothing else that you can do in this moment. And so yeah, my philosophy is just basically to get those emotions out. The last piece that I've been touring and doing in the flow show and stuff is actually a revenge piece in some form or matter. Really about talking about people who let you down, and then realizing that you can do these things on your own. You don't need someone to hold your hand. It's good to have direction and help, but getting it from the right people is the most important part. And so the piece was really just about, like, you kind of left me thinking that we're not gonna be doing anything or getting it done, but here I am getting it done regardless of not getting the support where I thought I was getting it or needed it.
What comes to mind are the lyrics, I'm a survivor.
Yeah, exactly that. So
What are some other emotions you have explored in previous pieces?
my previous pieces was a lot to do with depression, mainly. And also like finding a prop, right? So some of my first things that I did was, this hoop running into my life, and I'm like, oh, whoa, look at this hoop. And that was changing my life. But I kind of had to get past that, because that's already been processed in my life and integrated. So then it was on to the next thing. So now I'm kind of again in a place where I need to find what my next expression is going to be. I have some ideas, but I'm not sure.
There, we'll let them percolate for a while before we hear more of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have any projects you're excited about right now?
Getting my life together. Is that one?
That counts. Constant project.
Yeah. No, so the first couple months in this year have been very busy for me. I feel like I've been going left and right. I'm finally, now that school stopped as well, from my day job, I've been able to slow down a little bit and kind of recalibrate and reconfigure. So I think the next thing I'm really working on is aiming at Halloween and working my old routine from last year again to kind of put it back on stage. So I think that's really like the next thing that I'm doing during the summer, because I'm not doing a whole lot performance wise or anything this summer, which I'm actually pretty happy about, because I feel like I can prep myself for my next season, because I'm just part-time. I'm not a full-time performer.
That makes sense. So you need to spend some time sort of streamlining what you're working on and cleaning things up and just letting things crystallize and actualize so you're ready when your performance season begins.
Oh, for sure. And it's once again coming back to my personality, where I need that time to kind of figure it out.
Yeah. There's an ebb and flow, and you have your introverted time where things are being created and worked on. You have extroverted time where you're performing, you're out and about in the community, and it goes at a specific like wavelength that's unique to you.
Yeah, exactly.
You kind of spoke about this a bit in regards to your flow arts practice, but do you have a personal daily practice or artistic practice that increases your inspiration?
I think as a mother, keeping my life together is very inspirational. And kind of keeps me stabilized. But my son is a huge inspiration in my life. I know how cliche that sounds, but seeing the magic in a child is something else. And a lot of times when I find myself like not being able to get up and do the things that I want to or need to, as soon as he's around, I want to again. Like it kind of sparks that. It's not just for me, it's for him too. And it's not just for him, but it's also for me. And so it's really about that. I think my life being in balance is the most inspirational and thought-provoking thing, because then I open my mind up to things around me to be inspired. Because I think when your life is chaotic, you kind of close your mind. Being inspired is going to be very, very hard. But when you bring everything and ground yourself, you can open it up to take inspiration. Because when people are in a really bad place and they see someone else do good, they're not happy for them.
Jealousy arises.
Jealousy and things like that. And I think that's when you're not in balance, you do that. But when you're in balance, you're like, oh man, that was so cool that you did that. I'm so happy for you. Can you show me? So
it makes sense that your son inspires you. I mean, first of all, kids in general, just seeing the world through eyes that are not yet jaded. They don't have all the boxes built. They're like freshness going on, but also when it's your own kid, you're like constantly surprised by them or invigorated by their discoveries and their interest. And it can be like a tether. And like you're saying, it's this feedback loop. It's not like he's just inspiring you or you're inspiring him. It goes around and around in circles. And again, we come back to circles because we're talking about flow arts today, and circles and triangles and shapes are constantly what we realize we're not just doing with our props, we're doing with our lives, with our being.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And geometry is everywhere.
In your opinion, what can we do, or perhaps are you currently doing, to support equity, diversity, and inclusion in our performance communities?
This starts with the person themselves. I think that is the main key, because you can show someone all the information in the world and say, this is the truth, this is fact-based, blah, blah, blah. But unless they are willing to do the change, they're not going to accept it, because that's the ego. The ego is saying, no, I'm still right. These scientists and these people do not know anything. I am still the right one. And that is the wrong mindset to have. So it really starts with the person itself, because when you, as your own person, is loving and accepting and inclusive, someone else is going to see that, and it's going to, kind of this. It's going to snowball. So really, we have to start with ourselves first before we can go out. And that is the hardest thing for people to do. But I think the more we talk about, like, I know it's hard to go within yourself and say, where is this negative thought about that person coming from truly? Where is that truly coming from? And you might be surprised what you answer to yourself. Because a lot of this time, I believe a lot of this is all programming, right? We grew up in a racist environment, therefore we became racist, but children inherently aren't. It was a learned behavior. And once you understand that these things are learned behaviors that you can unlearn, you start putting the power in your own hands, and that starts going into other people around you. And they say like, hey, this person used to have a very negative opinion, but now they're so accepting. What happened? Why did they think that? So it helps other people think for themselves, truly. And because really you can put things in people's faces all you want, but if they're not ready to do it themselves, it's not going to happen. So we really just have to keep living in the examples that we are. However, I do believe there's some great things that we could do. I don't know the means of it yet, but one thing I really do think is that going into our less served communities and reaching out to the students, particularly maybe high school or something like that, where they don't have access to gymnastics or dance classes, or they don't have the money for it. Going into those communities is where we'll really start making the inclusion and the diversity in our community so much bigger. That's my opinion. I don't know where to start to do that. So if anyone knows how to help me go into the communities and do that, or someone who wants to do it with me, I'm all ears, and let's make it happen, because I think that's the only way how we're going to keep being inclusive and diversify, keeping those kids off of the streets with flow arts or whatever, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I know this is a tough question. I ask it of all guests, regardless of if they're an expert in this area or very experienced in this area, just to hear your personal perspective being a performer and having thought about the subject in relation to your own life. So, as a caveat for listeners, there are a lot of resources out there. We are just hearing from one perspective. And if you have thoughts on the subject, drop a line in the comments, message us. You can reach out. There's ways to contact Otillia. Just check out the show notes below. You can also contact her to find out about hooping classes. And if you have just questions about hooping or performance in general, she'll reach back out to you.
For sure, I will.
Currently, what impact do you most want to have on the world?
I want to help raise consciousness. I want to help people get out of the boxes of the programming that they've been put into. I want to have the ability to help people open their eyes that our world is magical, and it's not just a blob. And if you don't believe me, the science is there that says that it's magical when you go into that whole world. I think the more we raise consciousness, getting people out of the survival mode that we're all living in constantly is the only way we're going to make a difference in this world, because we've been living in survival mode for a long, long time, and it's not doing a good job with our planet right now. So I'm hoping that if I can just help one person start looking outside of the box that's been built around them, not necessarily just by themselves, by the people around them, I would have succeeded. That's it. Just one person is all it takes, because it's the cup that keeps pouring over to the next place.
Hear, hear. So witches and wizards out there, wake up. It's time. Notice the power of your word and your actions. That's what we're talking about when we say witches and wizards, that what you put out into the world, what energy, what words, what actions, that's your conscious. That's an actualization of your internal consciousness.
Exactly.
Is there anything else you want to share with listeners?
We have a universe, which is uni, and the universe was just one. And so it created diversity, so it can look at itself from different angles.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show, Otillia. It's been so lovely chatting with you and thinking more deeply about flow arts and the intersection with our mental health and our spirit and our physical health.
The Art of Flow is a free public resource for creators, teachers, and supporters of the arts who are interested in flow arts and fire dancing. It is available for mainstream distribution on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, YouTube, Stitcher, and at theartofflowpodcast.com. If you believe in a show that provides inspiration for artists and conversations on the creative process, please support the podcast on Patreon to keep it going. As a supporter, you can earn early access full-length interviews, submit questions for interviewees, be mentioned in an episode, and get a behind-the-scenes look at how the podcast is made. That's The Art of Flow if you're searching for it online. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook to receive shorter clips of episodes, updates, and notifications when new episodes are released. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.